Do you feel that your work is structured in the wrong way? That directives, guidelines, policies and work assignments are not designed for the people that are executing them and actually doing the work? Is your organization dependent on clear hierarchies, control mechanisms and regulations? Then maybe you need to begin growing another kind of organization together with your coworkers. For this, we will look towards a historical method for dealing with emergence, which is alchemy. And more specifically, one of the three main principles of alchemy, which is symbolized by salt. Salt represents the transformation of something fluid, smoke and vapor into solid form. In a social situation, such as a workplace, it's a process where you materialize abstract notions, such as intuition, ambition, and emotions, into new concrete forms of organizing. In the future, new forms of resilient organizations will be needed. If you, for example, want to build a new sustainable city, you will have to have alternative bureaucratic bodies to administer it. So for demonstrating a future possible structure of such an organization, I will use standard equipment that you can find in most kitchen areas and break rooms in most workplaces to materialize and embody this new structure. I will begin with showing a standard organization. And first, there's management, represented by this package of instant coffee. In a company, this would be, for example, the CEO, or in a public institution, it would be the Director General. And here is also included the managerial staff. And then we usually have some kind of control mechanism, represented by this milk package. And depending on the organization, this can be, for example, the financial department, the auditing unit, or the legal department. And we could add many different kinds of milk here. Almond milk or whole milk, for example, but we will stick with this one for this example. And sometimes there's also some kind of quality control function at the top of the hierarchy, which could be represented by this package of sugar. But as legal and financial concerns usually becomes more important than quality, and many people don't use sugar in their coffee today anyway, we will remove it from this example. And then we have the different departments that are executing the activities of the organization, the actual practitioners of the company or the institution. And this can, for example, be sales, technical staff, it can be customer service, administration, or production. And down here, we have the actual tasks being performed. The work assignments, the specific actions that are being executed by the employees. And this can be, for example, putting together two parts in an assembly line, meeting with a client, filling out an Excel sheet or similar. And these are, of course, different depending on which department they are related to, and therefore they are represented by different forms of pastries. And then we have this water boiler. And this is the representation of the owners. It can be the shareholders in a company or the politicians if we are talking about a public institution. And these owners, they then pour hot water into the organization. And this water are the demands. For profit, if we're talking about a company, or for a community service being performed if we are talking about a public institution. There are the different goals that needs to be met. And these cups, they are then filled with coffee powder from management. Employees, they need to be governed to be able to become coffee. And the spoons that are used to fill up the coffee with powder are the communication methods, such as work descriptions, directives, and PMs. And the content is then filled up with milk. It's a controlling substance that are carefully regulating the temperature, making it bland and lukewarm. And then the different departments, they sit and they drink their coffee, slowly eating their cinnamon rolls. And it's quite okay. It's not that it doesn't work, but there are other, better ways. So what does an organization built on trust look like? An organization where the aims and goals emerge from within the organization itself. The first step, it's a matter of perspective. We can build an organization on the trust that the cups are already filled with coffee. They don't come empty. They never were. The different teams of employees already have capabilities and skills, concrete knowledge, but also tacit knowledge and situated knowledge. This change of perspective is crucial. Seeing the cups as empty, you need to fill them. Seeing them as already full, you can just start drinking from them. And the next step is to pool what actually needs to be done. All the material and the immaterial production. Basically, all the services that are being provided. But for this, we need a larger platform. And here we share all the pastries in the middle, and we can choose freely from the tasks, mix them together, and organically compose a work situation where every team do what they feel connected to and what they're good at. And if the coffee in these cups are capabilities, run low, we can share with each other. We can distribute between the different cups. And if we need more coffee altogether, you can see here that every cup has its own spoon. They are in possession of the communication channels and they can provide themselves or another cup with the necessary coffee directly from the jar. The cup controls its own content, and every division, team or employee decides on their composition themselves. How much powder is needed, how it's stirred, and how it's mixed. And the jar, representing management, becomes a support function. And how about milk then? The control mechanisms. Milk, it's not needed here. Black coffee, it's what we drink. For people used to the sense of control that comes with the milk, the transition can be a bit tough. But it's totally doable. It just takes a little bit of time to get accustomed to. The actual goals, either in creating profit or providing services, represented by the hot water, it's the last ingredient that we have here. And here it becomes really interesting. We can use our spoons not only to put coffee in our own cups, but we can redirect the flow and put it directly into the boiler. Taking control of the communication channels, we can make the whole boiler become coffee, providing coffee everywhere for everyone. It's an organic, bottoms-up coffee distribution. It's a democratic procedure that is not representational, but rather departmentalized and distributed. It's an inspired form of grassroots technocracy. So if this is what we want, and this is what we have, the necessary transition might seem quite difficult. But there are ways of starting this transition now. There is a possibility for this new structure to grow inside the existing one, in a simultaneously symbiotic and parasitic way, both in mutual exchange and tapping in on the nutrients and energy of the existing organization. A parallel bureaucracy. So let's begin in the existing structure. The sharing of platforms and new communication channels is essential here. So what can you do? You can introduce new plates and new spoons into the system. For example, maybe this old ashtray can work. Maybe this plastic lid from the recycling bin, or this old style sugar bowl. And then we will also introduce new kinds of spoons. For example, this plastic spork, maybe this wooden spoon, or this plastic tablespoon that you use for baking. As these new sharing of work tasks and new ways of communicating does not look like the old ones, they have the possibility of going under the radar, not being recognized or seen as competition. But then you might ask yourself where the time comes from to introduce these new concepts and these new ways of working together. Research says that around a quarter of every workday, or around 2 hours every day, is considered empty labor, where you do things that you're not supposed to do during your work. Of course, this is very unevenly distributed between different occupations, but the potential here, it's huge. This 25% of non-work can of course already fill a recreational or a social function. Maybe it's a possibility to create some headspace or some time for yourself. Handled carefully, it can still fill these positive functions, while at the same time help you to invent new ways of social organization for you and your coworkers. The key is to have fun when experimenting in new structures. Playfulness at work is essential here. Some of the strategies is to invent new forms of ceremonies and rituals, as a way of communicating, but also as a joint platform. And this I've shown in some of my previous videos. But one other way of embodying it is also to reclaim or reinterpret existing ceremonies, which brings us to this particular setup. The traditional and existing workplace ceremony of sharing a pot of coffee and a cake and some pastries can be reinterpreted to fill another purpose. As we have seen, regular edibles and standard kitchen utensils can have a very strong symbolic meaning. And from now on, when you sit down on your coffee break, this action is appropriated. It's now a political action filled with meaning. Together with your fellow employees, you are embodying the new organization, a joint search for the ultimate cause, the philosopher's stone of administration.